Hey guys, Ryan here at Signature Edits, and inside of today's Lightroom tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at some photos, you guessed it, where you can edit along with me. We've got some landscapes, we've got some portraits, we got some bright photos, some dark photos, some photos of a guy on a flaming horse. Yes, you've literally seen it all. There is a flaming horse in this video. You have no reason to do anything else today except for watch this video. So let's get into it. Get ready for the flaming horse video tutorial where I teach photography. Let's go. All right, so we are going to get into it, but first, can we just recognize what a majestic animal this creature truly is? And if you enjoyed that intro and think it should be my new intro forever, just leave me a comment below, hit the like button. If you don't like flaming horses, hit the dislike button, and I'm going to say to myself, what is wrong with this person? Now, we have established that. We're going to stop horsing around, get down to business, head over to signatureedits.com/free-raw-photos, grab these files. They'll be up there in a second after I finish this video, and you can download, edit along with me, and make sure to tag the image author, the awesome people who have uploaded and shared their work with you. Their names are in the file names, or they uploaded anonymously, in which case you can just tag at Signature Edits Co. on Instagram so I can see what you're doing, what you're editing, and we can kind of be creative together. All right, let's get into it. We're gonna hit the develop module right now. Start with this guy right here. Beautiful shot, uploaded by @Lucerne, looks like. Now, what do I love about this photo? The composition is beautiful. I love the colors. I love how cohesive it is. What I don't like so much, obviously, it looks like this photo was maybe taken with an image with a lens that just was not quite set to infinity, because it looks like our foreground here is reasonably sharp, and the further back we get, the more out of focus the mountains are becoming, which is unfortunate. Now, the photo was taken at a 2,000th of a second, so it's not a shutter speed thing. It was taken at f11, so that would have softened it a little bit. What's kind of interesting is oftentimes people think that by stopping down, you go to f5, f6, f10, f25, it's going to make your photo sharper and sharper and sharper. The truth is that whatever your aperture is on your lens, let's say it's an f2.8, it's going to be sharpest when you stop it down just a couple of clicks. So let's say f3.5 or f4.0. Now it's going to be the softest, either wide open, at that aperture it was originally, the widest it could go, 2.8, or once you stop it down to a certain point, the more you stop down, the softer it's actually going to get. So if you can, with landscapes, if it's a bright sunny day, make sure you add a polarizing filter or a filter on the end of your lens so that you actually block some of the light coming into the camera and you don't have to stop down so much. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's try and recover some of these details. So I'm going to go through, I'm just going to add a whole bunch of clarity, and I'm going to use this texture tool inside the new version of Lightroom. I absolutely love it because oftentimes it can do a good job of recovering sharpness that we'd originally lost. So here's before. And here's after. Now, of course, we're adding some other stuff too, but hopefully we should be recovering some of the detail in this photo. Okay, let's zoom back out. Next up, I am going to add just a little bit of dehaze. Maybe I'm not. I actually kind of like the sort of seamless pastel feel of this photo, so let's try a few things. Let's add some color to the sky. Easiest way to do that, I'm just going to grab an adjustment brush, press O so I can see my mask, go to range mask, and go with luminance. Now I'm going to take that range, take it all the way up, so we're just grabbing the brightest parts of the mask, which is going to be our sky. And now we can do whatever we want. If you want to add blue, just take the temperature, tone it down towards blue. Now that's going to get rid of some of the nice kind of pink and yellow we've got going on in here, so I'm going to try adding a little bit of pink. And then I'm going to maybe just take our contrast down a little bit, so that'll smooth out the dark part of the sky here, the bright part of the sky here. Take my highlights down a little bit. Take my dehaze up ever so slightly. And then we can add some color by going down here where it says color. Hit this tiny little innocuous box. And then choose a color you want to add to your sky. In my case, I'm thinking somewhere around there looks pretty good. Okay, so here's before and here's after. Now we did lose some of the yellow in the sky that was happening over here. So we could just erase that from our mask. Take our flow down a little bit on the eraser. And I'm just holding Alt to toggle to the eraser. Just erase that one section out. So now we've added blue to the top of the sky. We've left the bottom kind of with that yellow in there. And we can grab another mask, kind of repeat the same process. So this time, I'm just going to mask right there. Go to my range mask, luminance, press O to see my mask. Take my range up. And now we're just going to be adjusting this lower part. Let's clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to erase off the top. Now, a fun fact for you, if you ever need to make a perfectly straight line inside of Lightroom, if you hold Shift, that is the key. So we're going to click once on the eraser, hold Shift, click again, and that'll actually erase straight across. If I turn my flow all the way up, you'll be able to see it better. So let's erase once here, just to show you, and then hold Shift. Bam, perfectly straight line. So if you ever need to do that, that's how you do it. So try it once more. One, and Shift, and right around there. Now we have a nice straight horizon. Okay, so press O again. Make sure our range is set a little bit higher so we don't target these mountains at all. And then I'm going to hit O, add some color, and this time let's go with some purpley orangey red. See what feels right. Probably around there. Something like that. Before, after. Okay. Now, the bottom of our photo is pretty lacking in color compared to the foreground. So, the foreground, that's the background. So I'm just going to mask on there now. We're going to do the same kind of thing, but take a shortcut. Just take our white balance, turn it down in that section. You can see we added a whole bunch of blue. Before, after. So now we've kind of preserved that pastel feel where everything is really nice and beautiful and blue. There's before, there's after. And if you think it's going a little bit too far on the contrast, the clarity, whatever, the texture, you can dial that back if you want. Go with a more dreamy feel. And yeah, sky's your oyster. It's not a saying, but I'm going to make it a saying. Lastly, I'm just going to play with these clouds because I think they're neat. I'm going to grab them. I'm going to go to my adjustment brushes and grab my add texture preset. That's my favorite. Just enhance those clouds a little bit. And then we can clean up that mask by pressing O, range mask, luminance, and let's just target the bright areas because those clouds are white. Perfect. Now we're just adjusting the clouds. So before and after. Let's move on. Okay, so I love this shot. No idea who took it. It's just using a dewy skin preset, apparently. Let's reset it. So that's our original photo. I don't really see the dew, but if you do, please let me know in the comments below. Do you do? I do. Okay. Good. So first things first, I just got rid of those little spots there. I'm going to zoom in. And what can I say about this image? Well, it looks pretty nice. We're just going to clean up the skin a little bit, make it glow, and just even things out. So starting with the skin, I do have a skin softening brush, but essentially all it's doing is just taking the texture, the clarity, dehaze, contrast down a little bit, saturation down just a little bit, and sharpness down a little bit. Now what that's going to do is as I draw on her skin, it's just going to smooth it out. And you can kind of dial it in, take the clarity down even more. And we're just going to take it, apply it on the skin. Any areas that we don't need to preserve the details, we're just going to make the skin a little bit more perfect by doing so. Now, if this looks too intense to you, that's totally fine. I need to dial it back because obviously it's messing with her skin color quite a bit. I don't want to do that. So we're going to come back and address that in a second. First, I'm just worrying about the mask. Now, an easier, maybe faster way of doing this would actually be just to mask everything like that. Then we're going to go into our range mask, go to color, grab this eyedropper, and we're going to click on our skin. Now, theoretically, it should just mask that color of skin. And if we hold down Shift, we can actually expand that mask by clicking on a different point. So now we've masked all the skin. Okay, so we've got that mask kind of dialed in. Now, let's just take it and dial back some of these settings so we're not quite so intense here. Probably the dehaze is what's going on. So we're going to keep the dehaze up, take the clarity down. You can see here's before and here's after. So it's really just targeted her skin. We can dial it back to whatever looks natural. Maybe even add some contrast back into it by taking the shadows down a little bit. Before, after. Okay, so now that we have done that, we're going to add a little bit of white. And we're going to target the areas we want to enhance some detail. I'm going to grab the eyes, eyebrows, bada bing, bada boom, lips, hairline. Reset these effects, and I'm going to go down to add texture and then dial it in from there. Now, if you don't have these brushes, you can just go ahead, pause the video, create this, and save it as your own brush down here. Or you can buy some Signature Edits presets, and that'll give you access to all of the brushes I've got. So here's before, and here's after. We've just cleaned up the skin, smoothed things out, adjusted the details a little bit. Now, the other thing I'm going to do before moving on is I'm going to even out the skin down here just because it's darker than her face, and I want them to be about the same brightness. So to do that, pretty quick and simple, we'll just grab that previous mask we used to make things smooth, take our contrast down a little bit, take the whites up so we brighten it. Somewhere around there. Okay. Is it perfect? No. Is there an improvement? Maybe. You decide. Now, that's without doing anything else. We could do 100 different things with this photo, add some pop with a little bit of an S-curve. That's a little bit more S-curve than I was bargaining for. Anybody think the tone curve in Lightroom is too touchy? Or just me? And I don't know, you could do all sorts of things. Like if you wanted, you could even change this background color. How do you do that, you ask? Well, we're going to mask that like so. We're going to go to Range Mask, Color, grab this dropper, press O, and you can see that it's done a pretty good job of just masking that background. This will only work if the background is a massively different color. And the easiest way to change the color, obviously you could do things like adjust the white balance, or we could go down here to Saturation, take that saturation all the way down. Now we are going to make our mask a little bit more expansive so that we get all of this. Okay, so let's just say we've got everything we want to masked out. Now we can grab whatever color we want and sub it in there. Now in this particular photo, it's not going to work with every color, but if we take it kind of in the same direction as it already was, we can really enhance the saturation. So let's take it and make it a little bit more of a, I don't know, yellowy orange like it was. Then take our saturation back up. And now we've got a really vibrant background. So here's before and here's after. And of course, I've also taken the texture, the clarity, dehaze down a little bit so that background becomes even more seamless than it was before. So before, après. Cool. A couple other things we could do. Of course, we got a few hot spots that are just too bright on the ear here. Clean those up, and on her lips and teeth, right up there, cheekbone, nose. Basically the spots that are just way too bright. I'm going to target those. I'm going to reset this brush by holding Alt, and then I'm just going to dial back the highlights a little bit, just so we don't blow anything out. Before, after. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so here we've got a beautiful sky, but our background very, very dark. Let's just see what we're working with. Brighten that up. We got some kind of an estate here. Now I'm not going to worry about trying to brighten the entire foreground, because if I do this, you're going to see it's just a suburb and it's kind of hazy and doesn't look super great. So we're going to undo that. We're going to focus just on the part of the image we really want to bring out, which I suppose is this estate right here. I'm going to add some texture and try and clean it up because it's kind of not looking so hot, to be honest. Looks very fuzzy. Let's take it at 1/40th of a second, so that's why. Okay, so we've kind of brought out this building in the foreground, before, after. We could clean up our mask by, you guessed it, going to Range Mask, Luminance, and just set it to the brighter parts of this so that we're not targeting everything. Dial our clarity back, our texture back. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of pink like the sun is hitting it at night because it's kind of around sunset. Maybe cool it down a little bit, like that. And then grab another brush. We're going to mask it a little bit more. We're going to attempt to do this subtly. I don't know if I'll get away with it, but we're going to try. Just going to raise our blacks a little, raise our shadows a little, raise our whites a little. Okay. So we've kind of brought out this building a little bit. We could spend a lot of time here just, finessing little details, getting rid of distracting stuff like these weird lights, making sure our mask is accurate. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to focus just on that building and then this sky. So let's mask out the sky. We're going to add a little bit of contrast, a little bit of dehaze, a little bit of saturation. Okay, now this whole image, not super clean. So that's why we've got a really fuzzy sort of foreground going on here. It's really noisy, so we'll try and clean that up. Go to our noise reduction panel. Just drag that up. And color noise, not so bad. We want to enhance and retain the details, so we'll try and take that up. Here's before, and here's after. So we have cleaned it up quite a bit. Can maybe take it a little bit further. And then the sharpening, we're definitely going to want to employ sharpening, but using the mask. So we're going to hold Alt, grab our mask, and drag it up until we only see the details we really want to sharpen, which is around there. Now, we're going to dial everything back so it's not quite so obvious. Here's before, and here's after. So that should make the image feel a little bit cleaner. Yeah. Before, after. And then we'll dial the whole thing back because it looks like I pushed it too far. Somewhere around there. Lastly, if you wanted, you could try adding some kind of a sun flare off in the distance because it looks like the sun was over here. So we're going to take our exposure up, contrast down, highlights up, shadows up, whites up, texture down, clarity way down, dehaze way down, and then just warm it up. Maybe add some magenta. And then it's kind of like you have a mobile sun flare. Mobile? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. We'll put it kind of off to the side. You can just dial it back and put it wherever you think feels right. We'll add even a little bit of color to it. And the heavens parted. Okay. Is that great? I don't know. Is it an improvement? Maybe. You decide. Show me what you come up with. Tag, add signature, edits, go. There's just a few ideas. All right, so this photo right here, more of a portrait. We've got a few things going on that are working against us. If you zoom in, you're going to see really harsh light is going on in this scene. We've got bags under the eyes. Basically, this photo was taken probably on a cloudy day, but when the sun was directly overhead around lunchtime. And the reflections and the lighting is very high contrast and it's not super flattering. So we're going to have to fix that. The second thing is we've got a lot of really bright saturated colors, really saturated greens, his shirt, this rose, we got pink, purple, blue, green, and none of those colors are super cohesive with each other, which needs to be fixed. And third, puppers here in the middle, unfortunately not in focus. So let's get to work. First, I'm going to start by just correcting the white balance. We're going to warm it up and add some magenta, probably around there. So here's before, here's after. You can see they feel a little bit more healthy. Might have taken it a little too far, but for now that'll be fine. Next, I'm going to go into my local adjustments, and there's no super secret perfect order to this. It's just fixing one thing at a time. So we're going to start with puppers. Take the sharpness up, try our texture, brush, and our clarity. Take our contrast back to undo some of what the clarity did. Maybe even a little dehaze. Shadows up. Okay, so that's getting there. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was. Okay. Next, let's try and tackle some of this contrasty situation. So I'm going to take the shadows up just a little bit. That's going to help brighten the bags under their eyes to around there. Take the highlights down, and that'll help with the blowout we've got going, particularly on her dress. And if I press J, it looks like we've even clipped. Not quite. But this dress is dangerously close to completely clipping. So we'll take our whites down as well. Okay, now we've got a little bit of an HDR feel going on, but hopefully we're going to be able to kind of counteract that here in the tone curve. So let's go to our tone curve, and I'm just going to add a basic S curve. I'm going to add more contrast in the mid-tones, maybe. Somewhere around there. Before, after. Okay, we still got the HDR feel. Not to worry, we can increase the luminance of the skin, and the oranges and the yellows. And then we can work on our saturation. Probably if I just take my vibrance down, that'll help. Say to around there. And then go on back. We're going to take saturation down in the greens because that grass is like neon. And there's two options. We can either take the luminance up in the greens or we can take it down. Now it just depends on the photo. Sometimes taking it up works, sometimes taking it down works. And again, the same thing in the yellows. So I'm going to try and brighten it and then desaturate it. Okay. Next, the blues were looking a little saturated too, to my eyes. Now the main problem here, we've got harsh lighting and we've got a scene with like all sorts of colors going on. So I really need to figure out how I'm going to counteract that. And I need to dial back on these shadows a little so it doesn't look quite so extreme. Probably around there. So before, after, we're making some progress. Still not great. Let's start by working on their skin, just brightening it up a little bit. So we're going to highlights and whites. Something like that. Don't worry, this is not our final product. So I'm just brightening things up a little bit. We're going to take the texture and clarity down a little. Again, that's going to help with the harshness. Take the contrast down and then dial everything back. So if you hit this triangle, you should be able to use this slider to just vary the intensity of all of those effects at once. So we can dial it back to somewhere we actually like instead of the extreme before. After, so we've brightened them up. It means we can darken down the whole scene. Before, after, we're making some progress. Okay, doke. So I'm not loving these greens. There are a couple of options here. We could do an adjustment brush and a color range mask. So we're going to try that first. So I'm going to go here, reset all these effects, go to our range mask and set it to color. And we're going to dab on there. Press shift, dab a couple more times just to get all those different colors of green keyed in. Press O to make sure that mask worked. It worked okay, although it's also masking her hair, his face, all sorts of stuff that it shouldn't be. So let's try, let's see if we can get rid of that. We're going to have to reset this whole thing. And of course, that's not going to work. Okay. Oh, that was very interesting. What the heck does that do? Who knows? I think I just moved my mask by mistake. Okay, try again. We're going to keep moving this around. And then we're going to take our brush and just erase it manually off of her face and hair and all that good stuff. Hello. Hold Alt. Okay. I don't know why it's picking it up on her arm. I guess her arm is green. She is the Hulk in disguise. Okay, not going to worry about it being perfect. Just on her face is where I really want to avoid it. Now, a couple things I could try. I could dehaze. That's not going to help. I could desaturate. That's going to look weird. I could add some color and I could adjust the white balance. So let's try warming it up. Maybe adding some magenta. Okay. And then we can add some color to it. Any color of the rainbow. So we're going to add a little bit of blue and that'll just counteract saturation. So here's before. Here's after. Now, if I warm up the whole photo or go to my color grading, I might be able to make something cool out of this yet. So where's my color grading? Hello. We're going to grab our shadows. I think that's where the green's going to be hanging out. And let's just make it more of a moody, warm green. And so you can see we're slowly adding cohesiveness by just removing some of those colors that were fighting each other. I think if I could desaturate these flowers too, it would help. I'm sure she loved them. And of course, if I were editing this wedding, I would make sure to maintain the color of the flowers. But just making them a little bit more subdued, I think is really going to help. Okay, we could take our vibrance back up a little bit. Back to our color. Okay, so I could keep playing for days, but I think you're getting the point of what I'm going for. Do you like it? I don't know, but I'm going to keep moving because we got stuff to do, people. So share your edits. I'd love to see your take on it. I'm sure it'll be 100 times better than mine. Okay, with that said, let us move on. This photo. I'm not going to spend too much time editing it. However, I wanted to include it because it was a submission that I think was really great, but it could have been so much better. So let me explain why. When we actually look at this composition, what is the focal point? Obviously, it's this crumbling tower. Now, it's cool, but the problem is that we've got a lot that's not adding to this composition. And that's why when it comes to photos, the best thing you can do is get it better in camera, right? It's going to make your whole editing process so much easier if you have that vision ahead of time, if you think really carefully, if you get the lighting right, if the composition is good. So when it comes to this particular photo back here, hello, we've got a nice tower, but this whole foreground, not really adding to the image. We've got a car in the background, not really adding. In fact, this whole side of the image, not really adding to the image. So what I think would have been much stronger is if this photographer had actually moved their feet and walked over here and put this tower in the foreground and made it larger in the scene, because if it's not adding to the image, it's taking away. So you see how much better that composition is already just by doing that, right? We've removed the distractions. We've kind of placed our focus more on what actually is meant to be focused on. Okay, but I think this could be improved one step further, and that's going to be by actually moving yourself even closer and switching your focal point from this tower to the landscape. Because the tower tells a story, but if it's a little out of focus, it's really not going to change the story much. It's a crumbling tower. However, I think the real interesting, beautiful part of this photo is the sun setting on this peninsula right here with all these houses. So if we had zoomed in, switched lenses to say a 50 mil or a 70 mil, it would have brought the background a lot closer. And if we'd focused in on here, we still would have seen the tower, but we would have had so much more for our eyes to look at and enjoy and just take in. So that's all I have to say to that. And the reason I'd use a zoom lens is because it would bring the background quite a bit closer. It would compress that background. Okay, so let's edit it really quick. We're going to warm it up. Contrast up a little bit. Let's just try and add some vibe to the sky. Range mask, luminance. Take that range up. Okay, reset. Take my exposure down a little bit, contrast, add a little dehaze, clarity down just a bit, and then add some blue. Now, because I've cropped in so much, obviously we're already looking like we've gone way too far. Things are kind of pixelated, but I hope you get the vibe overall compared to our original image. Okay, moving on. All right, this was taken in Banff National Park in Canada. Beautiful shot. Going to take our tone curve, and you can see because the weather was really nice and overcast, the exposure was good, it's not going to take much to make this photo look pretty cool. The colors just work. Everything is nice. Now, I'm going to take my blacks up a little bit, and then I'm going to work on this water because I really want to bring out the texture and the color of that glacier blue. One of those. Now I can just go to my add texture brush to save some time. It's not because this brush is perfect, it just gives me a starting point, and then I can go ahead and adjust things from there. So we'll take our whites down a little bit, maybe, or even the highlights. Let's try the other way. Okay. Then we can add some blue, add a little bit of green, maybe add some texture. And take the overall exposure down. Add some saturation. Here's before, here's after. Take our exposure down overall. Okay, and then the focal point of our image is obviously our model right here. However, A, she's out of focus, and B, she's pretty dark in the scene. So first, let's just do one of these, add a little texture, a little clarity, a little dehaze, see if we can sharpen her up a bit. Much better. Take the contrast down because she's looking super bright. Okay, zoom out. That's much better already. And then we're just going to add some more focus onto her. My favorite brush in all of Lightroom, just take the contrast down. And I find it's like a virtual spotlight that really blends things very nicely. Isn't noticeable. Okay, now I might have over-sharpened her a bit, but I hope you get the point of this entire image, which is, I don't know what my point is. Should have thought about that before I said it. And you know what? I think the forest is really beautiful in the back, but we could enhance this little, could add some contrast, maybe a little texture and dehaze. Increase the whites because it's kind of dark. So, there's our photo. Here's before, here's after. Pretty quick, pretty basic. A million things we could do. I'm going to move on. Here's a beautiful shot. We've got really, really nice lighting for this. It's nice and soft. We don't have any clipping, so it's going to be pretty lovely to edit. Let's start with the sky. I'm going to mask it out. Bada bing, bada boom. Reset this brush. Range mask, luminance. You can tell that range masks are very helpful. Okay. Now let's just add some blue to the sky maybe. Little dehaze. Little contrast. Take our shadows down and blacks down. Okay, and if you can't get the effect that you want out of the sky, like I really want to add more pop and it's just not happening, I could duplicate this mask. I'm going to move it just a little so I can get to it later and I don't confuse those two dots. I'm going to reset it and just kind of do the same thing. So you could either duplicate it and sometimes it'll just stack the effect and look great, or you can do what I'm doing and start from scratch. Now, of course, an easier way that we could have done just to mask this out would have been simply to go down to our HSL panel. If we go down to our HSL panel, grab our luminance, you can see the only blue in the image really is the sky, so we could have just taken our luminance down, and sometimes that's all it takes. Done the same thing with our purples a little bit. Maybe increase the saturation slightly for our purple. Or maybe not, depends. And then my hue, I'm thinking we could take blue a little bit towards kind of cyan. So before, after we've recovered a lot of detail in the sky, the next step would be to try and just enhance the contrast a little bit by taking these clouds and brightening them. So I'm just going to roughly mask over here. Okay, like that. Range mask, luminance set at the very brightest, and we should be able to just grab those clouds and nothing else. Or, of course, sometimes it's just not going to work the way we want it to. Like in this example. Okay, let's try adjusting the smoothness. That might help a little bit. Okay, let's say that's what we want. It's going to be a pretty transparent effect, so it's not going to matter too much. Just raise the highlights slightly. You're going to see we add a little bit more contrast to the sky, and the rest of the sky is going to pop a little better too. Do the same thing, but without trying to range mask it. Just roughly grab those clouds, and you can see we're just adding a little bit of contrast. You can be a little more careful than me, and it'll look nicer. But that's the real secret. If you want to take it to the next level, some of my friends who do travel photos and landscapes for a living, they spend a lot more time than I ever do, just with tiny little brush adjustments like this. Couple percent improvement here, couple percent improvement there, until your image is just miles better than if you had just done a generic edit over everything. Okay, so we got the sky. Now let's talk about our landscape. Honestly, it's pretty basic, I think. We're just going to brighten it up. And I think add a little bit of contrast, a little bit of texture, and that'll be it. So let's go to our luminance mask, press O. Okay, we're just going to set it a little bit lower so we don't grab the sky. Turn my flow up so I actually mask what I want to mask. And then, honestly, just raising the highlights and raising the whites might be enough. Okay. A little bit of texture because things are kind of soft. Depends what you're going for, but I'm sort of feeling that. Now we could take our green saturation down because I don't think that's adding to the image super much. And even blend the greens in a little bit more. Or you could go the opposite way. It's up to you. Choose your own adventure. Okay, here's before, here's after. Is it too far? Maybe. Maybe. We could then go in, maybe lower our shadows a little bit. You're going to have to decide. Okay, one final image. We got a nice dam here. Okay, we're looking kind of fuzzy in the back. And let's see, it was taken with a 50mm on what camera? Hello, you going to show me? It's the worst when you can't really remember your show me my info. It was taken with a Sony camera. We'll go with that. Okay, so let's see. We got really harsh light. Not a lot of saturation in that water. Hills are very soft. people in the foreground are very soft. I don't think anything in this photo is really in focus. So why is that? Well, it's not the shutter speed. It could be the lens. That's my guess. It was taken 50mm 1.8. So as we talked about, when you're wide open, that's going to be the softest that lens is. And if it was a cheaper lens, my hunch is this was one of the cheaper 50mm for the Sony, you're going to find that nothing really looks good. It all looks like kind of blobs. Even though it's in focus, it's not in focus. It's hard to describe. But we'll try and fix this. We're going to go down to our lens corrections. We're going to start with this fringing on the edge. That's another thing that tends to happen when you have wide open lenses. Okay, so we got rid of the fringing. Like that. Next, we're going to grab some sharpness and crank that bad boy way the heck up and use our masking to just dial that in. Okay. So now we have a slightly sharper image. Before, after. Also, what the heck is this? It almost looks fake, hey? Okay. So, I mean, we've made some progress. At least the image is sharp and not fringy anymore. Fringy, cringy. It's kind of funny. Now, the sky, super blown out. So we're not even going to worry about trying to save it. The mountains, honestly, I don't have much vision for this other than maybe adding a sun flare to the side of the image, just for some interest. So we're going to warm things up. Exposure up, texture down, clarity down, dehaze down. Hopefully you're getting the sense of how to add a sun flare by now. Maybe add a little bit of magenta, a little bit of warmth, and bam, sun flare. Move it around. We could have it coming from the middle of the image and make no sense whatsoever. I think if we make it even bigger, because there's really nothing interesting in this photo to me. Like, these people down here are kind of interesting, but they're not in focus, so only so much I can do. Okay, let's raise that exposure even more. Drop the exposure of the overall image. So here's before, here's after. Is it improved? I don't know. To me, this particular photo, there's no focusing element, right? I'm just saying to myself, like, what am I supposed to look at here? We've got a dam, okay, but what's the story? What's the interesting reason I want to look at this? I'm not finding much. And I've taken a million photos like this, where in real life, you're like, yeah, this is really pretty, this is really nice. And then you go back and it's like, it just doesn't have the thing I was looking for. Now, I really do like these guys down here. If this photo were more in focus, I would try and focus in on them. Ah, heck, let's go for it. Grab a little brush. Make a little love, get down tonight. Okay, we're going to add some clarity and some texture. And honestly, that's going to make things feel a lot better right away. Take that even further. What are we going to get? Okay, so now we're kind of focused in on these people here in the side. And the rest of the photo, we do need to brighten up this land. It just feels a little bit too dark. Range mask, luminance, set it to the dark parts. Okay, that'll work. Just take my whites and my highlights up. I don't want to brighten everything in those sections of the image. I don't want to lose the contrast. I just don't want it to be quite so dark. Okay, before, after. So now your eye is kind of drawn more towards our guys here off in the corner. And we're slightly more interesting. And I think that in this particular image, whatever this graffiti or sign, I'm really sorry if you know what this is and that's insulting. Whatever this is, I don't think is adding to the image too much. So we're going to attempt to blend it in. Now that's a really terrible spot removal, but because it's way in the background, I don't know if you're going to notice it so much. So that's our image. And now, my friends, the moment you have all been waiting for, the infamous, the majestic flaming horse. Okay, so let's talk about this photo first. I love it. I have no idea what kind of a situation in your life leads to this photo, but I'm glad that it did. So I'm going to take my noise reduction up. We're going to start by fixing that. You can see we got a lot of noise. We're going to try and preserve the contrast and the detail here. And then dial back our noise reduction to where it's kind of like, I can get away with that. If you can't see what you're doing so well, hold down the Alt or Option key, and you can oftentimes see things better in that toggled mode. Now I'm going to take my sharpening way up, try and mess with my radius, see what works best. I'm thinking somewhere around there. I know it seems like it's extreme, but I mean, the photo still looks fine. So really, it's not about what is the right sharpness setting overall. It's about what works for that particular image. And in this image, I think that works great. So you can see here's before anything, and here's after. We've made some progress. Now that we've cleaned our image up, let's start by just taking our contrast up, see what happens, and our horse disappears. We've got some major blue going on, so we're going to want to do this kind of more manually. I'm going to start by warming things up, because I just feel like this photo is meant to be more warm. And then if we take our green down right away, here's before and here's after. So we've kind of made some slightly more accurate colors. Maybe accurate is not the right word. Made the flames a little bit more terrifying. I guess that's kind of what I'm going for. I'm going to take my reds and attempt to mess with them a little bit. Take the saturation up a bit. Okay, then our blues, we can mess with that, and that'll make a massive difference in our image. So I don't want to push it too far just because the camera was already shooting in low light. So the further I push things, the more the image is going to break and fall apart. You can see we get some weird effects and grossness happening when we push the colors too far. So that's one reason you always want to shoot with the lowest ISO possible, so you have the most ability to edit later on. Okay, so we've made some progress, kind of cleared that horse. We made the horse a little bit more clear in the foreground. I'm going to add a slight S-curve, tone curve, some contrast by dropping the shadows a bit. Maybe raising the highlights a little. Can't get away with too much because we're going to clip all those flames. So I'm going to grab the flames, grab my white point on this tone curve, bring it down, grab my highlight, bring it up. And now I'm just going to try and make the horse pop out from the background a little bit. We're going to do that with a rough mask. Let's take our flow and turn that up. Okay, so the rest of the horse is kind of already standing out from the background pretty well. It's just this top half. The top half of the horse. I'm going to take my highlights up and my whites up. Maybe not that much. Take our texture tool and attempt to enhance Mr. Horse and Mr. Rider a little bit. Okay, press O. I don't know. I mean, that might have been taking it too far. Maybe that's what's happening. Try our clarity tool and dial things back. Before, after. Okay, little by little. Now, next thing I'm going to do is just add some contrast to the image. Now, I could do that with the contrast slider or a tone curve, but it doesn't really look so good. I think I'm going to do it selectively, like we did in our earlier landscape, just by taking my adjustment brush, putting it down a little bit, and then we're just going to paint on the parts of the image we want to make a little bit darker. And that's going to enhance the contrast, make the rest of the image pop a little bit more. So how do you make a bright spot seem brighter? Put it next to something darker. That's what contrast is. It's the variation between two things. So we can do that with our lights and our darks like this. You can also do it with color. And you're going to see that, yes, this is not super blendy. It's showing up and you can really tell it's an obvious mask. I'm going to go back and I'm going to adjust this later. Right now I've got it a little more intense than I need it and want it so that I can see what I'm doing. But you can see that as I do that, it is making things pop a little bit more. Assuming I can hide the mask and make it look natural after. Now this image doesn't really have much in the way of pure black because the stage was all very lit. So I think I might even do that off in the sides of the image in particular. Even on our horse here. He's going to stand out a lot more if we just darken down. And this whole technique of making the dark parts darker and the light parts lighter is called dodging and burning. And it's kind of one of the most fundamental editing techniques. So you can see that by doing this, I'm making my characters stand out quite a bit more from this blue haze that surrounds them. Of course, you could do a better job than I'm doing. Before, after. See how they pop a little bit more? We've added some shape to the horse's face. Made the clouds pop. Now this is not very blended. What I have to do is take my flow down, go back over these spots, and attempt to just blend them in so that they don't show up so much. And of course, I could also just dial back the effect that I've applied. That'll do the same kind of thing. Or I could go with luminance mask. So let's try our range mask. Luminance, press O. Okay, we just want to affect the darker parts. And you can see it's going to naturally sort of blend things a little bit, hopefully. So before, after. Then you just go through, you do the exact same thing. You could either do it by enhancing those shadows a little bit more. You could add more color contrast by desaturating the mask this time. So let's just show you. This is going to be way too extreme. But for example, if we take our saturation way down in the shadows or in the highlights, it's going to make the part next to it seem even more saturated. Now that looks absolutely ridiculous. But if we dial it back a little bit instead of a lot, before, after, in this case, it's not really working. Why? Because when I think about it, that was totally backwards. This part, the highlight, has less saturation than the shadows. So really, if you want to do that and add color saturation, you would do so by desaturating the highlights rather than the shadows. So let me show you. Let's go to our range mask. Set it to luminance. We're just going to attack the bright parts. Okay. Press O. Now, if I take my saturation down, we should see those clouds start to pop out a little bit more. And in fact, they don't do too bad of a job. Okay, so here's before, here's after. See how they just kind of pop off the canvas a little bit more? Is that a good thing? Well, maybe not. Maybe you actually want to keep it. You want those clouds to be colored? That's up to you. And of course, I go in here. We've got some highlights in the front, but we could exaggerate them a little bit. We could also add some texture to the smoke. So we're going to go through. Reset. Brighten up those highlights a little bit. Before, after. So little by little, we're making things just pop off the screen. Here's before, here's after. So you can see we're really starting to add some depth. It almost looks like this image is 2D, this image is starting to get 3D. Now this isn't a perfect product, and I've kind of rushed the process, but I hope you're getting what I'm going for here. And we could continue with Mr. Horse to add texture and shape to him. And this is kind of the fun part. You don't want to rush this process. You want to actually just enjoy yourself and say, okay, let's just sit down. It's like painting a picture. We're slowly going to do this. Never going to do this with a shoot with 500 images, but if you just have one photo and you want to take your time, it can be kind of fun. Before, after, right? So we're slowly bringing out those details. And once you do that, you might even find then you're able to do some overall masking because you've kind of defined what the shadows are and the highlights are a little bit more. So it'll look better than it did before. Maybe. Or maybe it'll look like crap and you start again. I do that all the time. So here's before and here's after with Mr. Majestic Horse. We've really broadened him out. We've brought him out and hopefully made some improvements over the original image. I don't know what just happened. Just got really pixelated. But hopefully you believe me. It looked better 2 seconds ago. Maybe I don't know what I did. I turned something up by accident. We can take our clarity down. I don't know what the grain is coming from, but we have finished Mr. Majestic Horse. I'm going to hand it over to you at this point to do what you will and create something awesome. So if this video has been helpful for you, can you do me a big favor? Can you hit that thumbs up button? Make sure to leave a comment below for me. Let me know what kind of photos you want edited in the future, editing styles, resources, you name it, and grab some free presets in the description if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Tag me at Signature Edits Co. on Instagram so I can see what you're coming up with, and I'll see you later. Go create something awesome. Peace.